Good morning and welcome to the second virtual organised by Recharge. I'm the moderator, Catherine Sheridan, and I'm the CEO and founder of Sustainability Consult. I work on credibility and thought leadership, and I've been around environmental policy in Brussels for nearly 20 years. So welcome. Today's topic is collection and recycling. We're looking at the circular economy in the battery industry. But first, let me give you just a few housekeeping points. This session will be shared at the end. We'll take questions from the audience during the webinar. We'll try to answer as many as we can. So please use the questions section below to enter your question. If you do have any technical problems, because we are all working on our private internet connections, just refresh your browser, or you can try to dial in by phone instead. So I would like to welcome the speakers. And just in case you don't know them all, I'm going to ask them to give a little sign when I mention their name. The only person where that's not going to work is Wolfgang Bedans. So I'll introduce him first. He doesn't have the webcam, so he can't wave, but he's senior battery expert at Bosch. He's Director of Government and Environmental Affairs at Saft, and that's a French battery manufacturer. Then we have Jan Teetgat from Belgian batteries materials manufacturer and recycler Umicore. He's Director of Government Affairs. Claude Chanson, the General Manager of Recharge, and Alain Vassar from the European Battery Recycling Association, IBRA, and Alain is Secretary General. So let's get started. First, I'd like to ask Claude, as the Director General of Recharge, about the batteries legislation in Europe. So batteries were one of the first products in Europe to be regulated by extended producer responsibility legislation, and that was in the form of the Battery Directive in 2006. The Battery Directive, it regulates the entire life cycle of the battery, from the design, putting it on the market, to collection and recycling at the end of life of the battery. Is now under revision, as well as the collection and recycling elements, which is what we're talking about today. So looking at the Commission's Circular Economy Action Plan, what does this Battery Directive revision mean for the battery industry? Claude.
Thank you, Catherine. Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon. So indeed, this 2020 revision of the Batteries Directive is a huge opportunity for the battery industry to show how a modern industry can be more sustainable. And I would like to highlight the importance of the Circular Economy Action Plan, which was, a high-level direction for the European Commission, considering clearly in this global vision that the economy has to become circular. High-level messages like mentioning that waste should become resources. And indeed, it's a huge opportunity for the update of the Batteries Directive in 2020 to modernize and clarify what can be at stake for the batteries industry when applying these circular economy concepts. And indeed, we believe at Recharge that batteries can be an important support to the circular economy. We have also to clarify that batteries are recycled, have been recycled in 2006. But of course, we have in Recharge have in-depth reflection and thinking about what means today environmental impacts, what are we looking for when we are recycling. And I think here there are plenty of important messages we would like to disclose today and describe in order to provide, let's say, a vision for the future, how the benefit, how the batteries can benefit to a circular economy in general. And finally, we have this COVID-19 crisis, which make us make this webinar instead of meetings. And indeed, we are strongly supporting the approach of this so-called green recovery. You heard about the conjunction of supporting the development of a new sustainable industry and the needed effort for recover after the COVID crisis. And we believe this is another opportunity, which makes, in fact, a lot of opportunities for the battery industry to be a strong actor in this future circular economy.
The Circular Economy Action Plan is this principle that waste is a resource and that the value of waste should be kept within the single market. And you have some battery recyclers among your members, and I guess that's also partly why you're so involved in this fight level. So maybe I could ask Patrick, because this is about a circular economy. Let's start right at the beginning. The collection of waste batteries. How does that work in Europe today?
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, everything starts with proper collection. You can't have a circular economy if you don't have proper take back and collection of used products, and here used batteries. So the way the legislation has been built some time ago, and this is the way it operates today, is to classify the batteries in three big families, three big categories, and the take back or collection systems and obligations are a little different for each category, and they are tailored to properly address the requirements of each category. So what are those three categories? First, you have the portable batteries. Portable batteries are essentially, not strictly speaking, but essentially consumer batteries, and the take back obligation, the collection obligations, are based on a requirement to set up a very high number of collection points located in the countries, in the member states of the EU, based on population density to facilitate the take back of the bringing back of portable batteries by end consumers. Then you have a second category, which are the automotive batteries, also called starter lighting ignition batteries. And for these batteries, the take back and collection systems are essentially based on the network of service providers which do maintenance and replacement of used SLI batteries. And then when it comes to industrial batteries, the requirements are for the producers, which are the companies placing the batteries in the markets, to have take-back systems where the users of industrial batteries can bring the batteries back. Now, these systems work very well because they're custom tailored to the three families of batteries. However, we recognize that there is a little area that could be improved, which are those industrial batteries that are used by consumers. They are a subset of industrial batteries, and these are essentially something called small traction batteries, used typically for e-bikes or e-scooters or similar equipment, where the equipment and the battery is maintained by the consumer and the battery is probably discarded by the consumer. And for those batteries, those small industrial batteries, maybe there should be an adjustment of the regulatory obligations regarding collection and take back. But this is a message we'll be developing in the course of the discussion. Thank you.
Do we have evidence that consumers don't take back batteries? I mean, is it a question of education and that maybe people don't realize that having a battery lying around at home is maybe not the right course of action?
There is evidence that all portable batteries today are not necessarily brought back in the hundreds of thousands of collection points scattered around European countries. But the evidence is that this number of portable batteries not brought back is steadily going down. There are sampling campaigns done on household waste in some countries which show that the quantity of portable batteries found in actually people open the dustbins and look at what's inside, and the amount of portable batteries found in those dustbins is gradually going down. So and also the collection rates that are being tracked by the portable take-back organizations, the collection organizations, are increasing over time. So it shows that more and more consumers are bringing the batteries back into the system.
Going in the right direction.
It's going very, very much so, yes.
Could I ask Wolfgang to come in on this? I mean, in the sense of how many industrial batteries are collected. Do you have the sense that not all industrial batteries are being collected?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I think for industrial batteries, we today have a rule. Can you hear me?
We have a rule. Someone else would like to jump in on this.
We can hear Wolfgang quite well here, I think.
Catherine, can you hear me?
Can hear him?
Okay.
I don't hear him.
Yeah, I think on industrial batteries, we have a rule that they have to be returned as well, like for the portable batteries. However, the system is different. So the industrial batteries are in general collected and returned back. But as Patrick mentioned before, it's a different system. It's not a portable collection system. It's a system where the batteries are brought back through the businesses, through the dealers, for example, for EV batteries. These are brought back through the car dealers. These are exchanged and then also brought back, collected and recycled through the car dealers. So this is a different collection system, but there is generally a very high collection rate for most of the industrial batteries. And as Patrick mentioned, there are some industrial batteries that are handled today like consumer batteries, like portable batteries. For example, one area is the small electric vehicle batteries, where the consumer has direct access, where he takes the batteries out for charging and he handles them directly. And for these, we are proposing a maybe different regulation for the collection. There is a very good system installed in Germany already, which follows some of the rules of portable batteries. And of course, this could be a benefit for all of Europe to install a system similar to that.
Have anything to add to that, or to clarify maybe a bit more?
Maybe one quick word, if you can hear me. I think the example that Wolfgang gave is actually rather interesting. Germany has found, the German industry in collaboration with the German authorities have found ways to even improve on the existing systems. And I think member states should learn from one another here and take the best solutions that have been implemented in one country and try to see how they could be improved in another country. So there is a lot of improvement to be gained this way, I think.
And there's different movements in Europe.
Is it a question of education? I mean, do the end users, whether that's consumers or in an industrial setting, do they know how to deal with their batteries and how to collect them, where to take them to, that they will be recycled, that it's important that they're recycled? Do you think that the users actually know this?
Yes, if I take this on this question, first of all, since 2006, this need of informing the customer how and when to bring back the batteries was in fact taken into account with this crossed wheel bin you have on the batteries, which means you cannot throw away and you have to bring back. And that, I think it's an important and let's say well-known signal for the consumer to bring back the batteries. And based on this, indeed, as was already mentioned, the industry has invested in the so-called collection and recycling organizations, which are in every country doing the job of gathering all of these batteries, as well doing advertisement on TV and others so that consumers are informed. So we believe this should certainly be continued and reinforced. As was mentioned, we have progressive, let's say, improvement of the collection versus the collection target in the European battery. And we believe that's the right way to continue on. We should keep the information for the end user clear, simple, and in order to facilitate this collection. This being said, of course, we understand that number of other informations may be provided to help the consumer and the professional understand how to dispose their batteries, where to collect, and so on. And we heard, of course, and we are supportive of new systems to provide information which would be attached to a label or other informal or let's say virtual databases with free access according to the different stakeholders involved in the battery return.
And I think you might have had something that you could add to this.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So nevertheless, we should not be blind for some leakages. So some batteries do not end in the recycling value chain. So we have to analyze what exactly happens with those batteries. We know, for instance, if we make the comparison with electronic equipment, part of the electronic equipment, including battery, is shipped to Western Africa, where it can be used for a second use, and that's good, that's useful. But on the other hand, it could end up there in disposals that we do not like to see. So that's a way of think how we can avoid it. So on the one hand, second-hand use is fine, that's good. On the other hand, it generates waste on a place where it's difficult to recover and to recycle. So same for electric vehicles. Part of the electric vehicles will be exported for a very good purpose as a second life, but also there we have to look at how we can avoid that the batteries that are exported together with the vehicle, that they are wasted or not recycled in a proper way. So these are things that we have to think on and to see how we can improve them.
You mentioned the three categories of types of batteries under the legislation. I mean, are there specific details there that you'd like to share about collection, or is there any relevant information there?
Yeah, so for electric vehicles within the Global Battery Alliance, so there are ideas to work with a battery passport, and that would mean that if there is a transfer of ownership of the battery, and certainly at the end of the life of the battery, that there would be clear responsibility of the last owner to make sure that the battery has a traceable end-of-life destination.
Electric vehicle, but I've never been poking around the battery. I mean, it's just, it would be done by the garage or.
Okay, but that's then the last owner, so they have to be responsible for the battery inside.
Okay. I'm wondering about Alain from the Battery Recyclers Association, if you had anything that you wanted to add at this point about how efficient or what changes might be needed to the battery collection so that as many batteries as possible can reach your members for recycling.
Well, we are definitely in favor of collecting more batteries and recycling more in quantities, whatever the types, portable or industrial or automotive or whatever. So we are not really involved in the collection. So for us, any good lessons learned from benchmarking exercise is more than welcome.
That's something with the new legislation or the revision of the directive or the circular economy action plan. Are you anticipating more batteries coming your way for recycling?
Let's say that on the portable batteries, consumer batteries, we will probably see a very steady but small increase. Where we expect a big difference is, of course, in the collections of EV batteries, end-of-life EV batteries. Today, still a large proportion of them are on the road, in the vehicles, right? Some of them are already collected and recycled, but the real volumes or quantities will only come to the recyclers in the years to come.
Thank you. What about consumer information and how we let the consumers know how they treat their batteries? Would anybody on the panel like to comment on that? How do we stop batteries going into the bin?
I can say maybe a couple words on this. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, for some reason I cannot hear you, but I'll assume I can hear.
Yes,
you can hear me.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, as you know, as you may know, producers of portable batteries are strongly encouraged to become participants of take-back organizations, of collection organizations, which bring all these producers together, and these collection organizations, through funding they secure from their members, producer members, set up, all these hundreds of collection points and do the collection, the sorting, and the sending of those batteries to recyclers for recycling. But also these collection organizations fund communication campaigns to the general public to ensure that the general public knows that the public should bring their batteries back to those thousands of collection points. And I'm sure that everyone, I would be surprised that no one on this panel or no one among our listeners haven't noticed that most department stores or hardware stores or do have right next to where you pay collection bins for citizens to bring their small batteries. So I think these communication campaigns have paid off, and those bins are easily visible.
Yeah, indeed, they are everywhere. Let's talk a bit about the circular economy plans then of the Commission and how batteries fit into. Claude, you're waving at me. Did you have?
Yes, yes. Because on your question, I would like to add some comments, because indeed it's an important point to look at the ways to increase this collection, make the consumer better informed, and try to find ways to progress. And we have seen in this batteries directive revision process number of initiatives and proposals, and we have been looking at that and trying to understand what would be beneficial. And one of them is, in fact, the question to look at how to redefine, to address this question of bringing the electric bike batteries, for example. Should question be raised, or should a possible way to set a weight limit, for example, say that's portable, that weight limit would be useful for people to understand this has to be brought back to consumer collection points or not. We don't believe this is a useful or a practical solution. First of all, because we see a number of drawbacks in setting a fixed weight limit. We know, and everybody knows now, you have more and more electrified equipment, starting from power tools with garden equipment, gardening, which have larger and larger batteries. So the weight limit for battery that the end user, so the consumer, can bring back may increase. So there is no very definite limit there. There are other technicalities associated with a practical weight limit, which would be, for example, that small part of large batteries would be classified as small and then therefore portable, when the large part or the large battery would be classified industrial. So it doesn't help clarifying the way to handle things. So for these reasons and some others, we don't believe this is practical. We still think that the way it is defined and simple information for the consumer, that everything they do handle and they are in charge of maintaining and bringing back, they should bring back to collection. And that's a simple message, without worrying whether it is large or small, or because if they are in charge of it, then they should bring back to collection.
So that's a consumer responsibility.
Correct.
So how does that fit with an extended producer responsibility, which says that the producer is also responsible for that battery in its use phase?
Well, indeed, the producer is providing the means for this collection for the end users to be for free and available. And as was mentioned several times, everything which is in the hand of the consumer should be handled, and is in practice handled, by these collection and recycling organizations, which are indeed organized based on the producer responsibility. And this enables the consumer to benefit of this free collections organization.
Yeah, and these are funded partly by the producers. Yeah. So
entirely, not partly, entirely.
Yeah. So the collection schemes, they are the industry's answer to extended producer responsibility at this point.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of valuable resources in a battery. If they're not all coming back, that does just seem like a waste, which takes me on to the circular economy question. I mean, how does the second life or the reuse of batteries fit within the circular economy?
Maybe I can say a word on this. Yeah, so yeah, we believe that a way to address properly the circular economy for batteries is to extend the life of batteries that can go through either a design that allows the battery as it is manufactured and as it is used in its first use to last longer. That can be a way forward, and several companies which are members of Recharge actually actively work on trying to extend the life of the batteries and place batteries in the market with a longer life. And also another way to address this is to allow the possibility that batteries that have lived the first time, if you will, in a first use, can be again used either for the same use or possibly for a different use, which may require some repurposing work, by the way, because when a battery is designed for use number one, is optimized for use number one, it is highly unlikely that it is optimized for a different use. So some amount of repurposing may be required to allow the battery to work properly for the second use. And this is where we are very much in favor of this, but also we need to be a little careful, and we try to deliver the message that we want to make sure that entities who would do this repurposing work have the necessary know-how and qualifications to do this. Batteries are equipment that store energy, possibly a lot of energy, and if improperly, and certainly if repurposed not properly, could be a source of risk for the end user in that second life. So we need to strike the right balance between the ability to have these batteries used a second time, but limit that repurposing job to fully qualified entities and personnel, trained entities and personnel.
What the repurposing actually means, and then we'll come to Jan in a second. Is it actually to open up, because a battery is a sealed unit, is it actually to open it up and to separate out the materials and then to repackage? What does that look like in practice?
Well, you know, a battery is a bit like, I think in English you call this a matryoshka. In French we call this in poupée russe, a Russian doll, where you have things embedded in one another. So it's an assembly of individual cell. A cell is the smallest element that's able to produce energy, and these are assembled usually in groups of 10 or 12, or could be even more, into things called modules. And then the modules, which can weigh, you know, anywhere between a few kilograms to maybe 20 kilograms, are then further assembled in larger batteries. And the battery is the assembly of modules, which is itself an assembly of cells. What repurposers typically do, they do not go into the cells. They do not open the cells. Opening the cell pretty much kills the cell. Repurposers usually do not even open the modules. Modules are fully integrated units with some sort of smart management that keeps the module operating well. But what repurposers do is they will typically deassemble batteries and reassemble batteries using different modules, and also modify or re-equip that assembly with a high-level software and hardware to manage the system. That's what repurposers do, essentially. So they don't go into the cells. You don't want to do that. Yeah. They often or usually don't go into modules, but they work with modules to reconfigure the modules.
And I mean, I would just want to have that done in Europe, where we have high standards of environmental and health and safety protection. I'd like to bring Jan into it because he has experience in it.
Yeah, I would like to add some comments from a materials perspective. So I fully agree with what Patrick says from the perspective of a battery manufacturer, but as you recall, we are a materials manufacturer. And as long as a battery has a functional value and you can exploit that functional value longer in time, that's good. So you certainly have to do that. So we are not urging to go to fast recycling. But there are some elements maybe to mention from the perspective of materials. So if you look at the EV batteries which are put on the market in the past years and today, it's what we call a relatively high cobalt content. Whereas the batteries which are produced today have a lower cobalt content. And so that would mean that if we extend the lifetime of the battery much longer, that we have a stock of cobalt in stationary batteries, whereas we could use batteries with a lower cobalt. And so we could make more optimal use of the cobalt in new batteries, because we can use it in a more diluted form than to keep them concentrated in one application. So of course you have to make, as Patrick already said, a kind of an environmental balance. And so what is the environmental value of keeping the lifetime of the battery longer? Or what is the added value, environmentally speaking, from using the battery materials for a new generation of batteries? So it all depends on the environmental balance. Another aspect is also that the market size for the secondary application might not be that much as the market size for EV batteries. So it is not that much. So not all EV batteries which come to the end of their lifetime will have a market for use in a second life. Moreover, they have to compete with dedicated batteries which are produced specifically for that application. So all in all, we believe that indeed it is very good if there is a functional value in that used battery, you have to use it, but you have to make the balance economically, but also environmentally, what might be the best solution.
Maybe I have some comments also, if I may.
Point of view, not just recycling.
Wolfgang, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Catherine somehow can't hear me. I don't know why. Sorry, yeah, some comments. I think the arguments Patrick and Jan outlined are very true. One was briefly mentioned, and I want to spend a couple sentences on that. Lithium-ion batteries are not simple and easy things in a way that, of course, Patrick already mentioned, we have very high energy content in them, and that's the purpose. We want to store a lot of energy in them, but this also creates some possible safety issues which are handled very well in the production of the cells, in the production of the modules and the packs. But they have to be considered, and there is very strong rules, safety testing rules, transport regulations that these batteries have to go through before the cells have to go through and the batteries have to go through before they come on the market. And if we really repurpose or even go back to a lower level in the battery, remanufacture the batteries, of course, the safety has to be a key as well. And we can't ignore the rules that are outlined for a good reason. So it's maybe not like printer cartridges or something where the application will simply not work. Here we have to make sure that we comply to all the rules when we repurpose possibly some batteries. So that's just an extra argument which was briefly touched, and I think it's a very important argument that we guarantee the safety of the functional battery for the consumer.
I will admit I did not hear any of that comment from
Alain?
I have a sign from Alain, who I think has something to contribute. Would you like to contribute?
Yes. As a recycler, I would like also to insist on the safety issue at the last step when you recycle the batteries. So I fully agree with Patrick when he mentions that operators that are repurposing batteries should have the right qualifications. When a lithium-ion batteries from an EV car is coming to the end of the life, even the second life, you need to dismantle it because there is no recycling process today capable of recycling these big batteries in one step. So besides the repurposing companies or operators, you have also dismantlers. And this operation needs also to be done by qualified people. In the past, the recycling model was usually a one-step shop, chiefly for the portable batteries. Today, it's already evolving even for the portable batteries into a multi-steps where there is a first recycler doing a certain operations, producing certain fractions, going to another recycler for further treatment. In the case of the EV batteries, that will be the norm. There will be always different actors involved.
Okay.
And therefore, a dismantler. And the dismantler must also be a qualified person to make sure that we guarantee the safety, not only towards the user, but also towards the recyclers at the end.
Well, that brings me on very nicely to the question about minimum content of recycled materials. So there's a proposal from the Commission about minimum content of recycled materials in new products. And I'm just wondering how that would apply in the battery industry. Alain, I mean, perhaps you could also share something with us on that, about available quantities or, you know, how much minimum content there should be. Do you have a position on that?
Well, we are confusing, I think, two possibilities contemplated by the commissions here. The first one is the minimum recycling content in the production of new batteries.
Well, let's talk about that first.
Okay. As a recyclers, We are in favor of this as long or as much as it is feasible and possible. However, we are not sure that imposing a certain recycling content by law will always be feasible. Because, like Jan mentions, we know that the chemistry, the chemical composition of the batteries are evolving over time. So it is very difficult to make sure that you will always be able to respect the recycling content. Another point where we don't have enough experience today is whether the recyclers could produce materials, what we call battery grade materials. They can be reused for making new batteries. We need to make sure that this is technically feasible at a competitive cost. And
that would be closing the loop to go from.
And then we can close the loop, but we don't have enough years of experience in that field to be sure that we can apply this to every kind of batteries.
Let's get Jan's comments on that.
Yeah, well, the general metals position is that you have to work on the collection side. So you collect the materials, whatever batteries or electronics, you collect them, then it enters into a refining, and then comes metals out. And the typical answer of the metals industry is, if you take copper, for instance, the copper comes in wires or in appliances, and then it's a melting pot, and the copper comes out, and it can go to whatever application. It can go to the same application, so closed loop, or it can go to another application. But it doesn't mean that maybe for some specific elements in some specific applications, it might make sense to promote collection and recycling by talking about a recycled content. I just want to give the example of the element lithium. So lithium, by far the most use, the biggest use of lithium is in batteries. So other uses are medicines or heat-resisting glasses or lubricants. And collection of lithium from those applications is much more difficult. So it's needed to collect the batteries to get access to lithium for recycling. And then indeed you can say, okay, once the lithium has been collected in the form of batteries and it is refined, then it can go to lubricants or medicines or whatever. But what we see today is that this refining to battery grade does not yet happen. So it's not happening because the volumes are small and because the processes are not yet developed on a large scale. Although that many recyclers claim to say, we have the possibility, we could do it. And then in such a specific case, it may be considered as a possible solution to develop the market for recycled materials. So we have to be quite selective. So as a general rule, it's not needed. But for maybe in some situations and for some elements, it might be a useful approach.
So you would not be in favor of a recycled minimum across the battery industry. You would rather do something that's sort of very more selective. Application by application, if I've understood correctly.
Yeah.
Patrick.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that there is obviously some beauty in a way in thinking that material coming from used batteries go into new batteries, and materials coming from used cars go to make new cars, and materials that come from used televisions makes new televisions, and materials that come from used forks make new forks, and materials that come from used spoons make new spoons. And of course, so but we all can understand the limit of this thinking. Old televisions were, cathode ray tube television, and you can't use cathode ray tube recycled material to make flat screen televisions. So you have to provide for a lot of flexibility in systems like this. We think that what is important, what has to come first is excellent collection. I think we all spoke about this and agree on this. And then indeed performing recycling operators which can actually extract valuable material, which can be used by industry coming out of their processes. Whether that material which comes from used spoons goes into new spoons or goes into new batteries, airplanes, or aircraft carriers may not be the key elements in a closed loop economy. I don't think closed loops means everyone gets exactly what he plays on the market. Closed loop means industry as a whole is able to benefit from the output of recycling.
Yeah.
And a lot of flexibility has to be there to account for volume changes, technology changes, also efficiency and cost requirements. So here's a bit the limitation of the, you get back what you sold.
It's quite a romantic idea about a circular economy in a way that, as you said, spoons would become spoons. But I think the fundamental principle of the circular economy is that things are not lost from it. So perhaps it's better that it's application agnostic in a way, that it doesn't matter that a battery becomes a battery, but that the materials are not lost and that there's a value for the materials. Jan, please.
Yeah, I fully agree. And as I said, in the general explanation is indeed that it doesn't matter to what high level or whatever application the materials go. But if we see that for some specific elements, there might be a possibility to develop a recycling process and quality of recycling by stimulating a recycled content. So we should not say it in general terms that it is bad for everything. We have to say that it has to be selective, and some elements and some applications might be stimulating the recycling collection and both quality of recycling. So it has to be very selective and thought about it.
Can you help us understand what stimulating recycled content might look like? What kind of stimulus that might be? Because we've just talked about perhaps not falling into the trap of the closed loop, but are there measures that you think would help to stimulate recycled content, even if it's not mandatory?
Well, as Patrick already said, collection is in fact the first step. So batteries which are not collected will not be recycled. So the question is indeed, how can we stimulate collection? And we make progress, and for portable batteries, we could, for instance, we could provide enough cobalt to go to 500,000 EV batteries if we would collect all the portable batteries which are already available for recycling. But it still does not happen. And so maybe we have to look for certain applications and for certain elements to see if the collection is not sufficient today, how we can improve. And there are maybe several options. So some people will talk about maybe deposits or whatever, but we have to look how we can improve. And we are there as an industry to improve collection and to make sure that there's more coming back to recycling.
I have a message here, if I may interrupt you for a second. I'd like to make a little message to our audience. There's 6 of us on the panel, and I can see 42 people listening to us.
82.
Please, I'm sorry, 82.
82.
Please, 82, yeah. Please go and open your drawers in your houses and look for your old cell phones. You probably have over 10 used cell phones today sitting in your drawers. Bring these cell phones back to your dealer. Tell your friends to do the same thing. Use this COVID-19 time to clean up your drawers, and everyone will feel better. You'll feel better. The recyclers will feel better. The circular economy will start kicking in faster speed. So please go and look for your new cell phones and use computers, by the way.
Yeah, and spread the word to at least 2 or 3 people, like the viruses, that you have a spread.
R0 must be greather than 1.
Exactly.
For success.
This would be a huge cobalt mine.
And talk about recycling.
Wolfgang, go ahead. Wolfgang, go ahead.
In fact, this would be a huge cobalt mine, and maybe this is even more useful than putting some recycled content requirements in a directive. I guess the idea is we keep the material, we don't dispose of it, we don't put it on garbage sites, we don't lose it, as we call it, from the technosphere, but we use it again in the technosphere in some high-tech products, whatever that product may be. I think also for different chemistries, this would be a very different regulations needed. For example, cobalt, we talked about the cobalt content varying very strongly, going down in the future. If we look at the good old nickel-cadmium batteries, which are used in industrial quite a lot, we make a lot in Europe, but we export. How do we account for that? How do we account for batteries coming into Europe? How do we apply the recycled content? I don't think it's feasible. There is no extra value, but a high burden, possible burden, and a high overhead on bureaucracy to cope with that. So that's where we see at this point it's not at all feasible to do it. Maybe in the long term, once systems are established, there could be some benefit of it, but at the moment we don't see the benefit really.
Yeah, if I may say just one word on Wolfgang's word. One key element here also is indeed the very elevated, the very large difficulty of checking recycled content on imported equipment. And God knows how much competition we're facing in the battery industry from overseas manufacturer. And we need to be very careful that such an obligation is implemented if and only if it can be enforced across all players.
Playing fields. Jan.
Yeah, I just want to add one comment. So if the Commission would move towards recycled content, I believe that correction targets and recycling efficiency targets should continue to exist, because otherwise the cost of recycling would shift from the companies that put batteries on the markets to battery producers in Europe. So that's something that we have to avoid anyway.
I'd like to, Alain, I was going to come to you with a question, but add something here.
Just a last comment. When we are talking about circular economy, we are not talking about reuse of material for the same purpose. This is a possibility, but you can also use a material for other high qualified applications and still fulfilling the criteria of circular economy. So it's important not to restrain the concept of circular economy only to the reuse. This is much broader than that. And that ensures also, by the way, a sound and fair competitions in the recycling market.
Thank you for the clarification. Now we have a poll. We'd like to know what the audience thinks. We prepared a poll, which if you click on the middle tab, polls, you should see the question. Do you generally think that the recycling target for batteries should be increased? Yes or no? So we're going to ask the audience to take a look at that, and we'll come back to the answers in just a moment. I'm not going to vote because I'm the moderator. That doesn't seem fair. I think that the current battery directive, we'll come back to the answers in a second on the poll, but the current directive sets recycling efficiencies. And I was just wondering from Alain and from Claude, as the representatives of the industry in Brussels, from the two different sides of the industry, how do you see that changing with the revision of the directive, current limits for recycling efficiencies?
Okay, I can start here. So recycling efficiency indeed means what we need to recover, what is the type of materials, the quantity of materials, the quality of materials. And we discuss this when discussing about closed loop recycling, for example. Of course, these has consequences. Today in the directive, there are some recycling efficiency requirements which are applicable to the nickel, cadmium, and lead acid batteries. And it is clearly discussed about applying recycling efficiency legislative requirements to recycling the lithium-ion batteries. And here we discuss about what should be really recycled. And here at Recharge, in fact, we made this analysis of what makes sense for recycling, what is important. And it was mentioned already, the cobalt, of course, the lithium, and there are discussions about the list of metals or materials that have to be recycled, and associated to this list, there is an amount, a quantity. Should we get 50%, 70%, 90% or more? And that's are important questions because indeed they also provide a part of the value and the content of the recycled flows and what we can get in a circular economy. So here we have an approach which is generally based on the what is important for the industry. Jan did mention already that, of course, lithium, for example, is important for the lithium batteries industry, and we recognize that getting lithium back from the collection makes sense, or sorry, for the recycling efficiency in the treatment makes sense to get cobalt back, and like copper and cobalt and others. then we also have to the general message that the global value of having the metals back on the circular economy market cannot be at any cost or any price, and particularly any environmental price or cost, because we see that depending on technologies, gathering the ultimate particles or the ultimate quantities of some materials may be quite energy intensive, or have using, more. It was mentioned, for example, the multi-step recycling. So if you add more steps for recycling very little part of it, then this starts making no sense anymore. So there is a need to establish a balanced and reasonable approach on the recycling efficiency criteria, and this is certainly something which we are happy to discuss, because it is exactly a point under discussion at the moment.
Alain, did you have anything to add to this from the recycling perspective?
Yeah, I would like to mention that when you look in the time perspective, the actual battery directive we have today is from 2006. At that time, there was not much issue with the lithium-ion batteries. They were hardly having a significant market share. EV cars were not existing, right? So I think it is a challenge now to make sure that the recyclers are embracing the change in the market and are developing process for recycling lithium-ion batteries. And it's precisely in the lithium-ion batteries where you have the most critical material. If I take an example, we recycle since 2006 or even before alkaline batteries. They are made of iron, zinc, manganese. These are not really critical materials. The critical materials that we need are precisely in the lithium-ion batteries. And that's the challenge we need to focus. And in that respect, I think it is a good thing that there will be some specific requirement regarding the recycling of lithium-ion batteries in the future. But like Claude mentions, we need to make sure that we agree on what must be recycled and how much, and for what cost.
Yeah, I mean, it's necessary to.
So the balance is very important.
Jan, did you have a couple of very quick comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to react on the poll results. So I see.
Going to that now.
So I see that the vast majority says yes, the recycling target for batteries should be increased. So 80% says yes. But I think that, as already said by Claude and Alain, we really have to look at what and how rather than how much. And just to give one figure for the audience, in a lithium-ion battery cell, 40% or almost 40% exist of oxygen and carbon. Recycling oxygen and carbon at the cost of energy or chemicals doesn't contribute anything to the circular economy. So we really have to look, if we want to increase the recycling, then we have to look at what are the elements that we want to recycle. Is it cobalt, lithium, nickel, copper, or is it oxygen and carbon? And so that's an important question. And it's then also how. Is it energy intensive? Do we create a lot of chemical waste? So these are the more important questions than just the number as such.
So there has to be an efficient process for recycling that makes sense.
Efficient and good yields for the important elements.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Patrick for any response on the poll, because we actually had 81% of people thinking that it should be increased, recycling should be increased. And there's always a tendency to think that more is better and that we should always push for higher standards. But as Jan has said, it's not always so straightforward. Patrick, could I invite you to comment on this?
Well, yeah, I mean, more is better. I know more chocolate cake is better. We all agree with that. When it comes to recycling efficiency, I think we here at industry think that there has to be increased expectations, but also some flexibility in the requirements placed on recyclers. What do I mean by saying some flexibility? We are conveying to the regulators the concept that the recycling efficiency should be on a pool of substances. You mentioned lithium. I think Jan mentioned cobalt. Nickel was also discussed. Copper was discussed. These elements, these metals are high-value metals for industry in general and for the battery industry more specifically. And we would like to see a push towards a joint recovery target or a joint recycling efficiency, taking into account all these metals jointly. The purpose of having a joint recycling efficiency rather than metal-specific recycling efficiency or recovery efficiency is to allow for, first of all, for more diversity from the recyclers. We would allow several different technologies to come into play and compete against one another. Some better for cobalt or nickel, others could be more efficient for lithium or copper. So it would be important to give that flexibility. Likewise, in the future, and hypothetically, if there was much less cobalt demand for new generation batteries in the future, well, you certainly would want the recyclers to put more effort in recapturing more lithium or recapturing more nickel. But if you do that, technically, we know that you will lose a little bit of efficiency in recapturing cobalt. If you have very high level requirement on each metal, you will take away any ability from the recyclers to steer the processes a little bit to better answer demands of industry and be more in line with the closed loop philosophy. Yes. So this is the message we'd like to carry forward here. A joint, elevated, but a joint group target, if you will.
Okay, great, thank you. Now, I promised we would take at least one question from the audience, and time is ticking on. So I'd like to go to the audience question now, which is about repurposers and repurposers that they should be qualified. So are you aware if there's a plan to establish certification for repurposers in the EU? And there are many questions. I know that some of our speakers have tried to answer, and also the Secretariat have tried to answer some as we go, but I'd like to put this one to the panel. So is there a plan to establish certification for repurposers in the EU? Anyone who would like to answer is welcome to jump in.
Yes, I can answer at least because, of course, in Recharge, we are supportive of clarifying this approach of Second Life, and a certification for Second Life recyclers is something which was not yet clearly identified as a way to go. What we heard about is the work which is ongoing about standardization, which is already a part of it, because if you wish to go to a certification, you need to have a base to compare and to qualify and certify, which is the standard. And today, there is no yet standards which are clearly capable of describing the whole responsibility for Second Life. We know there are some standards in the US particularly, which have started describing the technicalities of what means preparing a batteries for reuse and Second Life, but we don't have yet the complete picture. As you heard in Recharge, for particularly, we are looking for responsible behavior from the point of view of customer service, from the point of view of service, and all of these aspects for the moment are not yet really completely, let's say, aligned and set as a standard that could go for a certification. But this is certainly a good, let's say, idea to follow and develop.
Does anyone have a very quick couple of words to add to that, or does that answer the question completely?
Maybe one quick word. As part of the requirements that would need to be placed on repurposes are electrical abilities, and there are already professional standards to certify proficiency in electrical work. So these would be part of the package. So there are some building blocks already out there. Okay,
great. Yep. And that really brings us to the end of this second Recharge Virtual Roundtable. I would like to thank you for listening in. Thanks to our expert panelists. And if you'd like to know more about the legislative framework for batteries in the future, there's one more webinar, May the 26th, and that's going to be about the environmental performance of batteries. And so with that, I will close the webinar now, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
the speakers.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. See you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.